Right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adventures Elsewhere Reviews, the spoiler-free book show. I am your host, Jay Black, and today I'm here with another ARC. It's not a sort of book I'd usually take on the show, but I particularly liked the other thing I read by this author, so it was kind of a no-brainer. This is Anhelos Lost by V.C. Baldick. This is sword and sorcery, which, as I understand it, and if you're not a fantasy head, a sort of subgenre of epic stroke high fantasy. This is adult, it's 330 pages in paperback, and it is self-published. The very first thing I'm going to say is that this is very different to this. And that is just showing how much range Baldick has as an author, that these are such different books. So that was quite interesting to see, actually. And usually at this point in the episode, I like to give my overall impression in 3 words. I just think that's a fun thing to do. This one was quite difficult to do that with, actually. I would describe this as detailed, modern, and classic. It's one of those books that has a real sort of classic fantasy vibe, but also feels modern. It's quite interesting in that sense. And yeah, the detail in all the lore and the world building is definitely there, though we'll get more onto that later. As always, we're going to start with characters. That's the thing I like to do. I'm going to put this down before my arm falls off. There are a lot of characters in this book, as seems to be a bit of a thing for Baldick. Let's begin with our 3 main characters, and these are Quinn, Sion, I hope I'm saying that one right, because that's how it's going to be the entire video, and Embry. So Quinn is the Crown Prince of Arctus. He is becoming king somewhat imminently in this book, and a whole load of tension effectively stems from that. He's a very guarded man, I guess. He's guarded, he's quite poised to an extent. It can go out the window quite quickly. He's got quite a quick temper. I would say at points, but kind of a lot, actually. He's a notable swordsman, he's a magic user. Magic is spelt a bit differently in these books. It's spelt Q-U-E at the end, which I just think is a nice touch, to be honest. He's a fun character, he's quite a good main character to have. He feels, again, a bit like a sort of classic fantasy MMC. I have a lot more to talk about with him later. Now, Sion, I think, might be my favourite of the leading trio. Not just because he's anxious soft boy, I can actually get kind of bored of that stereotype, I'm not gonna lie. But Sion's written very well. He's an extremely multi-layered character. Actually, it doesn't always come through in the text particularly. He does often seem like anxious soft boy with ambitions wanting to be his own man, which I think is a fun character arc anyway, to be honest. But you can just sort of tell there's more going on under the surface if you sort of spend the time to really think about him. Embry is the third of the trio. She is the woman. She's very complicated. There's a lot to Embry. She's a real badass, ambitious, she's quite stubborn, she's very protective, as is Quinn. They both have a very strong protective streak for those that they care about and those that they love. There's a big theme of ambition in this book. There's a lot of ambition, a lot of ambitious characters. It's side characters and main characters. The main trio are very charming and very endearing. Even someone a bit like Quinn, who's what you'd expect in a sword and sorcery book as the main character, he's still very charming and unique in his own way. The leading trio is a very strong character set, and it does extend to the side characters as well. The side characters really come to life in this book. I think they all think they're the main characters, really. There are a few I want to talk about. I'm not talking about all of them because there are too many for that, to be honest. Or this video would be 10 hours long, and I'm not editing that. Who do I start with? Let's start with Sai. Sai is a merchant of a somewhat enigmatic background. A sort of enigmatic merchant, sort of friend to Quinn, not quite sure where that relationship stands, whether it's a bit use, whether it's tempestuous friendship. Not entirely clear, it's not meant to be. That's really fun. But yeah, these Sai is I think one of my favourite characters. He doesn't have much page time, but he is very mysterious. He knows a lot of things that he doesn't really seem like he should. He's one of those people who just kind of knows too much about everything, and you know that from the moment you meet him. But still, like, the extent of the knowledge that he has is a bit. Okay then, remind me again how you know that? And why are you telling Sion that, actually? What is your goal here? Because on the one hand, it really seems like you want to help Quinn and Arctus, and on the other hand, it kind of seems like you want to watch the world burn. Not really sure what to make of you. And that's part of the reason he's my favourite. He's one of my favourites. He's very, very interesting. Really, really liked him. Very well written. Lena is Embry's closest friend. She is third in line to the throne of Luz. Very much portrays herself as this sort of naive princess type, and everything's pink and whatnot. She is very feminine. But she's interesting because she is genuinely really clever and really quite manipulative, but not in a mean way. Like, she puts on this front of being naive and vulnerable and sort of, I guess, young and dumb. And it's all just really a sort of guise for her getting what she wants. And she lets people realise it at a point, if they're smart enough. But it's like, isn't it charming that I can do this? Actually? And it's interesting because she is very charming. She sort of comes across as sweet evil genius. I mean, she's not evil in any kind of a way, but that's somewhat of the vibe you get with her. She's interesting. She's not someone I expected to like because, I mean, it was clear from the get-go that her sort of naive, girly persona is somewhat of a facade. But how she was going to use that to be manipulative, but what she does with it is quite interesting, and actually I did find myself quite fond of her, and she does have a lot of warm feelings for Embry. Their relationship is interesting because it's, on the one hand, it's very affectionate, it's also very fraught, but there's a good sort of friendly competitiveness there, even before they decide on having some sort of contest. It's sort of there anyway. It's an interesting relationship that I really liked reading. I'm gonna talk about the two queens next, I think. So there's the Queen of Arctus and the Queen of Luz. And they're both interesting characters. The Queen of Arctus is one of those antagonists you love to hate. She's just a horrible woman. To be honest, she's mean to Quinn, she's vindictive, she's power hungry, she's very fake. She's manipulative, she's conniving, she's snide, I don't like her. I don't like her one bit. But at the same time, she coddles Sion within an inch of his life. She's massively overprotective, but again, it's not out of any love for him. It's about power dynamics. It's about, no, you're going to be my little boy whether you like it or not, and I'm going to, make you incapable. And Sion is very aware of this, and he very much underhandedly sort of manipulates her, and that's one of my favourite things about Sion, but, tangents. She's just an interesting character because, again, she's well written in that sense of, like, she very clearly has a plan going. She has set out to get something that she wants. It is not clear what that is, but it clearly involves both of the princes very strongly, and she will use them, and yeah, they kind of know they're being used. She doesn't think Sion knows that, at least that's the impression I get, but it almost doesn't matter that they know. So, I mean, that's quite interesting. I enjoyed that. The Queen of Luz really doesn't get much page time. There's just like one scene quite close to the end of the book that really sold me on her. Is again this extremely poised, extremely controlled. I don't want to use the word magnificent, but it kind of fits. Anyway, this very powerful, very poised, very deliberate woman who is also kind of conniving, scheming piece of shit. Like some of the things that she's okay with, it makes sense and it fits really well with one of the core themes, but it's also, this is your literal daughter you're talking about, right? And it makes you question more about her and her morality. She was really fun. There was a very good scene with her and Quinn. I'm going to talk about that more later because I really loved that scene. The other one I want to talk about is Valerius, or Val for short. He's one of Quinn's friend's bodyguards, and he has a lot of interactions, obviously with Quinn, but with Embry as well. And it's sort of interesting because one of the sort of main tension points of this book, and this is not a spoiler by any means, is the sort of Quinn, you're not married and you're about to be king. So a lot of the book is spent on, Quinn trying to find a wife. And Valerius doesn't really like the decisions that he's coming to or making and tries to sort of under the radar interfere. And he does so in this very, very clever way that I really liked. But it also, he's like very protective of Quinn in his own way. And there are just a couple of things Valerius said, and this is like complete like fan theory whack shit. But I kind of got the vibe that he's closet gay. In the sense that, oh no, I don't have a wife, I'm a military man that's focused on my career and I just really love Quinn. I'm like, I think there's something a bit more going on between you and your feelings for him. It seems like it's very unrequited, but maybe a further theory about exactly what Valerius was planning. Like, it's nonsense, obviously that's not where things would go, but it's entered my mind. So, I mean, the characters in this book are fantastic, they absolutely carry the story. They're really well written. The writing quality overall, the characters are super well written, I really love the characters. But there is a bit of over explaining going on and a bit too much exposition for my liking. Maybe this is a genre thing, and it's also kind of difficult to criticize in a book like this as well. Like, it feels really harsh because this book is already over 300 pages, and I'm saying you need to use more words to tell the story, and as soon as you get to a book this long, it's really difficult to do that balance, but didn't quite land everywhere for me. There's a big sort of introspective thing in this book. A lot of characters do a lot of thinking, which I like, and there's something very clever done here. One of my big pet peeves that I have is when a conversation gets interrupted for law or exposition or this or that. And it happens in this book, but it's handled very cleverly in the sense that, they'll be halfway through a conversation and often Embry or Quinn is just sort of thinking about, okay, but what does this mean? And if that happens, what does that mean? And they tend to sort of go off and then the other character will go, hey, are you listening? I was talking to you, or what's on your mind, or that just felt very naturalistic because that's often the problem I have with this is that a conversation is interrupted in a place that really doesn't feel natural, and VC navigates around this expertly, and you get the best of both, and I genuinely think that's really, really well done and a really nice touch. There is an action sequence. There is a moment in the middle of the action sequence where Quinn is actually talking about Val's sword, because he infuses the sword with an amount of magic. And then it's a short paragraph, but it is a paragraph in the middle of the action sequence talking about the origin of the sword. Am I being harsh on this one? Yeah, probably. especially given that this is a fantasy book and maybe it's just a genre thing that I don't like. I mean, it's fantasy, it is what it is. I think part of the reason this bothered me so much is because I've, a couple of weeks ago, come off editing Shadow on the Snow, which has a lot of action sequences in it, so I've been thinking about that a lot. So then I'm probably being a bit harsher on this than I should, but it did bother me, and I think it probably bothered me because I know that across the entire rest of the book, things like this are handled excellently. So it's just like the one instance where it doesn't quite work is more jarring because of it. The other main thing that bothered me about this book was the pacing, because it was slow. And again, I don't mind slow books. I just feel like there's a time and a place for that. Again, this is by and large almost definitely a genre thing. I'm aware that fantasy books generally are a bit slower, especially in sort of epic, high fantasy, sword and sorcery, that whole vein is sort of meant to take its time. This is almost definitely a me thing. But there were points where, and I will talk about this a bit more later, it just didn't feel like very much was going on. Embry's POV doesn't come in until about a third of the way through the book. And I'm not an advocate, particularly for the Warrior Cats way of doing multi-POV, where it's like character 1, character 2, character 3, character 1, character 2, character 3, because I think that's really limiting. There's a time and a place for that, but do whatever you want with your POV structure, so long as it works. This book seems to sort of straddle the line between complete freestyle multi-POV and more Warrior Cat style. I don't know why I lean on Warrior Cats so much in these videos, it just kind of happens. One of the few fantasy things I've read, I guess. I'm not opposed to the idea of a POV character coming in much later and then sort of carrying through, especially because I feel like Embry maybe gets a few more POV characters beyond that point than Quinn and Scion do. I might be talking out my arse on that one, but it felt like it. But just putting the pieces together, it felt a bit like the book started a bit too early. And the reason I point this out is because this is something that I do, and I have to fix in edits, is I have a tendency to start a book too early and have to cut stuff off the beginning. You know, Mr. Nakagami is as fine an example as any. I cut 2 full chapters off the beginning of Mr. Nakagami. And you know, seeing that pattern with my own writing, I sort of wondered about that here. There's a lot of early scene setting and a lot of early setup that's quite important. So again, I could just be completely wrong. But again, by and large, this is just a personal preference thing. Now, talking about one of the biggest things in fantasy, let's go on to world building and lore. So obviously this is set in a different world. This is set in an old world, and it's got a map in the book, actually. And it's very, very cool. So there are a few different countries and whatnot. The world building in this book is really, really tight. It's very believable, it's just, it all makes really good sense. I really like the world building. There's a lot of detail. This is where the sort of detailed part came in my original sort of 3-word summary. There's so much detail in the lore, but again, it comes up where it's relevant. It's not just, like, you do get sort of paragraphs of lore here and there, but it's never irrelevant. It's always, you know, related to what's happening. That's something that's balanced really nicely, and in a book like this, that's really difficult. So props to the writer for sure on that one. One thing that's really nice to see in the world building, and something that I sort of hoped, something that's, I guess, somewhat similar to Ungovernables in this sense, is that there aren't always clean solutions. A lot of the solutions are quite ugly and quite messy, and there's not really a nice, tidy way of resolving them. I, for one, really, really value that, because it's something that I think is not done often enough. There's, especially as soon as you get into magic and magic systems, and quite a complicated magic system, which there is in this book, more about that later, it's too easy to just go, aha, but there's a spell, which means that this is going to be fine, and too many people do that, and it really annoys me. I'm really glad that it's not like that in this book. It's much, much more the other way of actually just things are messy and difficult and weird and not very nice. And I really appreciate that gritty realism. I always like that in stories, and the more fantasy you get, the more important I think that can be. So it doesn't just get too unbelievable and too ridiculous. This is just really well done. Really love the world building and the lore in this. This is great. Honestly think the strength of the book, outside of the characters and world building, is in the themes. There are some really, really good themes in this book that are handled really nicely. So, I mean, it sort of goes without saying that there's royal drama and sort of court tensions and all of those sorts of things. That's fun. That's well done. That's nice. I like that. But there's also the sort of, because you get Quinn's POV and all the different pressures on him from all around and all the sorts of things that he should be doing versus what he wants to be doing, you get that sort of burden of royalty thing and how other characters see that. And there's a very, very good scene between him and one of his bodyguards, I think it's Val, about what he's done and the sacrifices he's made that people just don't see. And I really like that. I like the reality of that. I think that's something that's important to have in a story like this, and it's just handled superbly. Also, all the politics that go along with all of this, and some of the other stuff that happens in the book that does nudge into spoiler territory. It's me, of course I like that. Again, it's nicely done, it's messy, it's drama filled. Everyone's trying to come up with their own solutions to a problem that's just not easy to fix. None of the solutions are great. None of them are going to protect everyone because you can't. And I like this. This is fun. This is realistic. It's, natural, high stakes in that way. Family tension comes up a lot as well, and not just because of, royal drama. At points there's quite a lot of tension between Quinn and Sion, because it's interesting with Quinn and Sion's relationship, because Quinn has this overprotective streak, and he doesn't like how the Queen of Arctus overprotects Sion. And he tries to, let Sion be his own man. That's what he wants and what he says he wants. But he does also, in many ways, fall into the overprotectiveness trap himself. He's not anywhere near as bad as the Queen, sure, but he does also do it. Perhaps wittingly, perhaps not, at points. Because, there are things that Sion can't do and doesn't know. And they're both very aware of this, but they handle it differently. And the sort of naturalistic tension that comes off that is real strength of characters and themes, and just the book itself. I really, really like that. Because again, there's not always a great solution to these sorts of things, not one that's gonna not cause tension. And, stemming from that overprotectiveness, there's also this thing of loyalty and trust, especially with Quinn and his bodyguards and Valerius. The Val Quinn loyalty trust thing is very, very interesting to me. You get a very similar thing with Embry and Lena, and the sort of, okay, at what point is loyalty dangerous? Is he too loyal? Is he planning something of his own? Is trust dangerous? Where do you put these things? That's very fun. And again, it's all just grounded in realism. For a fantasy book that is very fantasy, there's a lot of realism and realistic characters, realistic problems. Perhaps that's the Baldic touch. You have that, it's very different to Ungovernables type thing, but it has that gritty, messy realism. That's all still there, and I do just absolutely love that. The other thing is opportunity cost is just huge in this book, and I've sort of talked about this enough already with you can't save everyone. If you protect people, sometimes it feels like betrayal, sometimes it is betrayal. and they get angry with you, and a lot of dilemmas don't have great solutions, and there will be opportunity cost, and where do you put that? Where's the best place to put that? And are you sure it's the right thing to do? Can you ever be sure it's the right thing to do? I really love that. These are the strengths of the book, to me. The whole threads around politics and court drama and opportunity cost and loyalty and betrayal and all of that sort of stuff, the overprotectiveness. This is where the heart of the book is, and it's really where the strength is, and it's executed. Executed best as I've ever seen it. Since this is a detailed book, let's get into some more detailed things. This is a fantasy book. Where better to start than the magic system? I like that. That's hard to do. To make me like a magic system, props to the writer on that. That's not easy. There are sort of two different types of magic. There's an innate magic that comes from what's called the magical core. And runic magic is used by those who don't have innate magic. They have runes as a sort of... It's magical weaponry. It is what it is. And some of it is more controllable than others. Some of it you can use it in a controlled way or a sort of chaotic way, and that's quite interesting to see happen. That's quite tight, that's quite fixed, and for how it works and what it is, again, it's appropriately detailed, it's appropriately done. And it's interesting in contrast to the sort of core magic that feels a lot looser. It's a lot harder to sort of predict how that works, how that will happen. I like the contrast there. I don't usually like sort of loose magic systems particularly, but it just makes a lot of sense with the sort of little slight touch of spiritualism in there. I think that's a really nice touch, and it ties it together nicely. This is what I mean when I say the world building's really tight and detailed and it makes sense. Places like the magic system, you really, really see that. And then there's a point where magical healing comes onto the page, and I go, I've talked about this on my podcast. Magic healing is something I really struggle with, because it's just, whenever I see that, I go, okay, here comes stake erasure. We got magic healing, nothing has stakes anymore. This is the time where that is not true, because magic healing has somewhat of a cost on the healer. It's very tiring, but also it's not just a failsafe, it's not a be-all and end-all. You can magically heal someone and be very good at it, but there are still lasting implications and lasting effects. You know, it's not an instant solution to everything. Again, props to the writer, props to the world building. That's how magic healing should be. If it just erases stakes, then you've got a bad book. Worth mentioning also that there are potions. The vast majority is sort of stamina potions and how they work. That's one of my favourite parts about the book. You know what, let's segue into that. Let's segue into what the characters actually do in this book. This is a bit of a mixed bag. We talked about stamina potions, so let's talk about Scion, because this is one of my favourite parts about Scion's entire character, is that he struggles with addiction to stamina potions, and how he rationalises it in his head, and it's appropriately worrisome. I think it's one of the things that's handled insanely well in this book. Once he gets into training, he has a lot to do. You know, by that point, you start to see more of the stamina potion addiction. It comes up originally very, very early, but you see much more of it past that point, and all of his training and his progression and that whole arc. That's all great. The problem is, before he gets into training, he doesn't really seem to have that much to do. Quinn's arc, I think, is quite difficult. I think his arc, like, a lot of the early chapters with him are good. There's a lot of setup you have to do with Quinn, because he has a lot going on, being Crown Prince, and a lot of interesting secrets, and a reputation of sorts. He's quite quickly onto a bit of a loser. I don't know how much can really be done about the fact that his whole arc across the book is him trying to make a decision and procrastinating and thinking about it a lot. It's quite difficult to make that engaging after a certain point. Yeah, Embry has a lot to do and Scion has a lot going on, so there is the sort of contrast, the sort of slower side with Quinn, which on the one hand is nice, but it gets a bit old at a point. He doesn't have a lot to do besides think and procrastinate about a decision where, at a point, it becomes quite clear which way it's going to go. Like, it's not certain, but I'd have been surprised if it went the other way. And ultimately it didn't. I think one of the biggest issues that Quinn has is a time skip. There are two notable time skips in this book, the second of which is fine. I don't have any problems with it. I'm sure there are reasons that are relevant in the lore, it's not apparent in the book, but like it doesn't cause any problems. I'm not that bothered about it, personally. There's a big ball, which is a great scene. I'll talk about that more later. And then almost immediately there's a 6-week time skip. And it's kind of bizarre to me, because what we're told immediately after the time skip is that Quinn had grown closer to these two prospective women. And he had some mixed feelings about each of them. And yeah, you see this in following scenes where they're quite friendly now. Obviously they first met at the ball and there's that whole deal, but now they're quite friendly and the relationships change and you can see his conflict. But it seems a bit odd to me that the whole bonding time, a lot of that bonding process is not on the page. And again, this book is 300 odd pages. If you have the full 6 weeks, I'm not trying to advocate for having the full 6 weeks on page, but skipping over all of it, it's not a problem for any of the other characters' mind. Just when the strength of the book is in its characters and is in opportunity cost and balancing of duty, it just seems like a really, really odd thing to skip over. Embry doesn't have this issue at all. Embry has tons to do in this book. Embry has, dreams to negotiate, everything with Lena. That's a very complicated relationship with a lot of things that happen in it. Her whole idea of, destiny and her opportunity costs, which are very interesting. What she sacrifices, the betrayal she faces, the whole deal with Valerius. I like Valerius, can you tell? But, is it a coincidence that she's the only one I'm not saying this about when she's the only one that comes in a third of the way into the book? At this point, usually I talk about sort of vibes and tone of the book. I'm not going to spend ample time on this because I got into this pretty early, to be honest. It's classic fantasy. That's the vibe, that's the feel. If you like classic fantasy, it's going to be great. There is this sort of modern twist on it, modern touch, that's quite fun. A lot of the latter stages sort of comes out as a will they, won't they? And it goes on a bit for me when that's just... To me, it was quite clear how that was going to go. I like romance, and I like romance subplots, but this one just didn't quite land for me, I guess. There are some really, truly fantastic moments in this book. So the one I touted earlier and first, Quinn and Lucian Queen scene, it's not particularly long, I don't think, and it's late in the book, so there's not much I can say about it without pretty big spoilers. But the power play and the dynamics, especially because the Lucian Queen really doesn't have much page time. Certainly not before this moment. This probably makes up like 50% of her page time in the book, if not more. It's like really seeing her and who she is. It's a battle of wits with Quinn, almost. And all the politics talk and the opportunity cost, and a lot of that really comes to a head in that scene. It's snappy, it's just really, really excellently written. Like, that might be my favourite scene in the entire book. That was really, really good. Really loved that scene. The other one I mentioned early was like just everything about Sion's addiction and the journey there. Again, I've sort of talked about this already, but again, the naturalism, the realism, the sort of the way he justifies these things to himself, it's worrisome, it's heartbreaking, but it's so understandable being in his POV and the things that he deals with. Real strength of the book. And, you know, Sion has a lot going on by this point, but that's really the sort of heart of his character arc to me. Really like that. And the ball as well, for many of the same reasons as the Quinn and Queen, was really fun. There's a lot of undertone, some points it's less than subtle, sort of by design, how the characters behave. That's all really fun, what happens in the ball, how Quinn sees things, how Embry sees things, how they... I don't know, there's a lot going on in the ball. A lot of it's under the surface, some of it rises to the surface, some of it doesn't. Everybody sort of knows it's all politicking in the game and drama, and it's all sort of badged up in glamour and sophisticated, and it's one of those things that can fall really flat really easily. It's very hard to do. But it's done well here, and it's a lot of fun, and it's one of those where you're like, yes, please dance again. And it's also the start of the Valerius Embry thing. You get wondering about that. That, I don't know if you can tell, but the Valerius and his scheming and how he handles things is my favourite part of the book, to be honest. That sort of mystery around that, that's a lot of fun. There's a lot of mystery in this book, and I really enjoy that. It carries throughout what different societies are doing, what different characters are doing, different antagonists. Allies, what they're doing. Are they allies? Is there betrayal? How do we... Like, there's so much mystery, even deep in the lore. All of that's so much fun, and it carries through the book through a lot of really key scenes. Like, there are so many more I could talk about where there's good mystery. And I am actually going to mention a few more. I can't really talk about them because it's spoilers, but I am going to mention them in the sort of art-inspiring moments sort of section of this, because I do like to do that. Quinn and Embry having dinner, big fan of that scene. Sion's final scene in the book, I think, is also absolutely excellent. That one's really fun. There's a whole lot you could sort of see with that. That one was very visual for me. I think my other big one is the Embry and Val sparring scene. It's one of my... I mean, this is just, like, one of my favourite kinds of scenes that you get in books like this. And just, like, in any sort of medieval type fiction, when it happens. When you get, you know, two sort of warriors sparring while also sort of talking politics and drama with each other, and sort of going head-to-head battle of wits and physical battle and how those play off against each other. I love that shit. It's great in this book. It's visual. It's so much fun. I love that scene. Getting to a rating on this book, because we're getting to that point, it's just really difficult. Because there's so much about this book that I genuinely, truly love. I love the characters, especially the side characters and how all that comes to life. I love the mystery, I love the politics, I love the family tensions and the opportunity cost and the gritty realism and the lore, and there are some truly excellent scenes in here. I love all of these things, but there are things that really do grind my gears a bit. You know, the over-exposition, over-explaining. Yeah, maybe this is a genre convention, but I don't like it. The fact that Quinn doesn't really have much to do in the back half is a bit of a shame, especially when the other characters do, and the first part of the book was really strong for him. You know, where the romance subplot hits a real high in a really strong scene, it just keeps going on for too long after that. Especially with the scene that comes prior to that for Quinn. The mystery of the romance, the will they won't they, sort of evaporates at that point. And again, the pacing is a fantasy thing. I'm aware of that. And I'm also aware that it can take me a while to get into a book. Like, me not really getting into a book within the first 50 pages, especially when it's something this long, not unusual. But when it gets to, you have to be a third plus into the book for me to start sitting up and going, oh, okay, this is good. That feels like it's worth a mention. It's a really difficult book. It's a book that I really, really wanted to love. I did. There's so much good stuff in here, and I wanted to love it. But I didn't. And I'll be disingenuous to say that even then I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of scenes and a lot of moments and a lot of characters I really enjoy, but there are too many things that irritate me. And again, this is a genre thing. I'm not a fantasy reader, and it's very plain to see here. This is a great book. It has really strong characters. It's got the classic fantasy with modern twist vibes that you're bound to like if you like fantasy. And there are some truly excellent scenes and really well-written themes in here. If you like fantasy, you will love this. Without a doubt, this is the book for you if you like fantasy. I do not like fantasy. I have very openly gone on the record before and just said I don't like fantasy. Really at all. I'm not a fantasy reader, I'm certainly not a fantasy lover. There are parts of it I really enjoy and parts of it I really don't. The only rating I feel it's fair to give, I don't particularly think it's fair because it's genuinely a good book and this feels really harsh, but I'm disingenuous not. I don't like giving books a 3-star rating, I don't, but it's the only one I feel I can give. I didn't enjoy it enough to say it's a 4, that's disingenuous. But it's a really good book, and it feels really harsh to give it that low a number, but at the end of the day, art is subjective. I can recognise that this is a great piece of art. It's just not my cup of tea. If you are at all more of a fantasy reader than me, which is not hard, get this book. Link in description, go get it. So that's about the end of this episode. Last but not least, for other writers, if you have an ALC you would like to send me, there's a cheat sheet at the end of the video in the outro so you can see what sort of things I am and am not interested in. There's also a full information video with timestamps that's in the description. The form to submit an ALC for my review is also in the description. But that is about all from me today. So you have a wonderful rest of your day, and happy reading.